Hey, what is good, all my peoples out there, and welcome to a brand new episode of Indie MOOment here on eCAV Radio. It's Monday, and my first question to you all is, how did you enjoy Record Store Day? We talked about it a little bit during the show last Wednesday, and I'm curious, did you guys participate in the festivities? Man, I did. I had a really good time jumping around to a few different record stores. I caught some live performances, picked up a few records, so I'd say overall, it was another very successful Record Store Day in the books. And speaking of Record Store Day, my guest in the studio with me, I am willing to bet, also made her rounds over the weekend picking up some brand new music, Miss Sarah Bradshaw. Sarah is the music director at the Bridge 909, which has an FM dial of, yep, you guessed it, 90.9. They're a community-funded radio station, which really allows them to focus in on all things music and contribute to the amazing arts and entertainment scene here in Kansas City. Sarah is a very lovely individual, as you will hear throughout the interview today, and I had a lot of fun talking with her. We got to discuss some really interesting things about how she got started in radio, what her role entails as a music director, how programming works at the Bridge, her thoughts on the future of radio, and on top of all that, we get to hear some amazing songs from artists that ushered in her love for independent rock. And with that, let's go ahead and check out one of the artists that Sarah sent me. This is Rodrigo Gabriela with the song Tamacun. After this song gets done, we'll jump right into the interview, which will take us up to our very first commercial break. You're tuned into Indie MOOment here on eCAV Radio. All right, I'm in the studio today with Miss Sarah Bradshaw. Sarah is the music director at 90.9 The Bridge.
Hello. you.
And you have quite a impressive resume I found online.
Oh, no.
So you started
off...
Did
you look at my LinkedIn page? I'm going to have to work on
perhaps.
that. Perhaps.
It looked good.
I put like a cursory thing up there, dude. I'm not even like being modest. I really need to look at my LinkedIn page. That's what happens when you're not looking for a job. You're like, oh, it's fine.
Right.
You know, like, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, you're good. So 2004, 2007, you're at the University of Central Missouri. You got your Bachelor's of Science in Broadcast Media. Mm-hmm. And then you ended up going back and getting your master's in Mass Communications.
Actually, never left.
Never left?
Yeah.
Straight into it?
Yeah.
Was that a hard decision to make?
Oh,
to
no.
Say, I want more school?
Do you want to actually, I mean, you're going to get to it. You did say I'm the music director at the Bridge, but I enjoyed teaching. And that's what I was doing when I decided that I was going to go get back and get my master's because I could get a GA-ship for it. So they'd pay for it, and I would also teach. But really one of the big motivators, in addition to learning how to teach better, was that in order to continue working at the Bridge, it was a student position. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, well, if I continue on and go get my master's, I can keep working at the Bridge for a couple more years.
Oh, wow.
So that's what I did. Yeah.
Nice. And speaking about, you actually were a speech instructor.
I was.
At the State Fair Community College.
I was.
You did that for, what, 2 years?
I did, yeah.
How'd that go?
I loved it, actually. Yeah. It's funny, like, so my degree was in broadcast media, and then my master's was in mass communication, and I loved the radio station. It was a huge passion of mine. I got to meet and interact with a bunch of really cool artists, and the student staff that worked there were amazing. The professional staff that were there were amazing. And I kept, I went and I got my doctorate. Or sorry, no, yeah, I wish.
You're working on that now.
Yeah, we'll see.
Welcome back to Indie MOOment here on eCAV Radio. I'm your host, Dave Beats, and my special guest in the studio with me today is Miss Sarah Bradshaw, who is the music director at the Bridge 909. Now, before the break, we were talking about how Sarah got into radio, so let's go ahead and continue the interview.
But I got my master's, and it got to a point, I was like 2.5 years, I'm at my thesis, like I'm getting ready to get done. And again, it was a public institution. The Bridge used to be owned by the University of Central Missouri before KCPT, Kansas City's Channel 19, came and bought us out. Right. And so, it was only a student position. They didn't have a huge budget. And, my boss John is my boss, and he was being really great. And he never said to me, like, have you started looking for something else? Because this is a student position, and when you graduate, you can't stay here. And so I never wanted to be in that position. I didn't want to, and I kept hanging on. I actually stayed a semester longer, and nobody ever said anything to me. Everybody was really cool, but I didn't want to be that person. What's that movie with Ryan Reynolds, way back in the day, that made him? It was where he's a college student. It's completely Van Wilder.
Oh, okay, Van Wilder. I was thinking Just Friends.
Yeah, I didn't want to be that kid that was just kept hanging on. Right. I never wanted to be in that position. So without anybody saying anything to me, I started looking for other opportunities. At the time, I had to stay in the area because there was family stuff going on, and so I couldn't. Looking outside of the state of of Missouri wasn't really an option for me. Mm-hmm. And so there was this. I had been teaching the whole time I was in school, and so I was like, "There's this beautiful teaching position that came open at State Fair Community College, and it was teaching, speech communication, interpersonal communication." And can I tell you that it was phenomenal. I mean, I really, really, really enjoy teaching as well. So, and I was teaching as I got my master's as a grad student, and I really developed a passion for it. I love those light bulb moments, and being able to see the direct impact that you have on people. And so I did that for 2 years, and I did. I absolutely loved it. I really did.
So what goes into being a speech instructor as far as what's a curriculum? Is it ESL or is it?
No, it's all because it was at the college level. It was at the community college level. So it's your standard, well, hopefully not standard.
Proper.
But I mean, it's your public speaking class. And so public speaking, again, interpersonal communication, small group communication, just communication classes, really. And so, with public speaking, it's, creating environments where you can get people to get comfortable with creating outlines and getting up and speaking in front of people.
And that's really hard because that's probably one of the number one fears that a lot of people have.
It is. It really is. But I think, my approach to it was creating a comfortable atmosphere that allowed people to, while they still might be freaked out because it is an intimidating process, to at least feel comfortable to mess up, because that's how you learn. That's how you get better.
Right.
And so creating a nurturing environment instead of a an intense, destructive environment where people feel like they're being,
under a microscope.
Yeah. So that was my approach anyway. And then, because eventually if you get people comfortable in that type of environment, then the hope is that they start to get enough of experience under the belt. So if they're put in a hot fire situation, they'll at least have a little bit of experience, going into it.
What kind of tips do you give people when they go up and they do public speaking?
There are the standard, it's a very physical process. Mm-hmm. And so first and foremost, as far as leading up to it, it's just like anything, like research. You need to be ready. You can't just, a lot of people can't. Some people can. But a lot of people can't just get up and speak on the fly about something that, they maybe didn't know all that much about. Like a lot of times, that's one of the things. It's like, you're going to be asked to speak on all manner of different topic. And so knowing what you're talking about helps.
Being an expert, yeah.
Be comfortable about what it is that you're getting ready to get up and talk about. Picking something you're familiar with helps you out. I don't know, as a student, don't pick something, but I mean, if you're going to pick something that you don't know anything about, you better before you get up there. And then also, it's a very physical thing. So there, are things like breathing exercises. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with that TED Talk, that Amy Cuddy, Your Body Language Shapes Who You Are. Uh-huh. For people who haven't seen that, I would always show my students that as another kind of, because it's a very cool, easy physical thing that you can do in regard to your body pose in order to, decrease your stress hormone, the cortisol, your stress hormone, and increase your testosterone, which tends to be your more... It gives you more of a powerful feeling, a feeling of power.
Sure.
So, and, just changing your body stance helps you to do that.
Yeah.
So,
are there any things you tell them, like look at people's foreheads, or when you look out, just like look at the lights?
It's different for everyone, I told my students that back in the day. It was, it's different for everyone. So some people, it helps not to look directly at their audience the first couple times, but eventually, if you really are serious about being a public speaker, in my opinion, you got to work on that too, so maybe look over people's heads, maybe look at the back of the room to a certain extent, but an audience knows if you're engaging with them or if you're not engaging with them. And if you're not looking at your audience at least, then I think eventually they start to kind of pick up on that. Yeah. I could be wrong, but that's just my...
But you're a professor, so
no,
I'm taking this, writing this down.
I think it's, people can sense when you're being more engaging. Yeah. If you're making eye contact with people, if you're, nodding. Yeah, you have to look at your audience to gauge whether or not they're interested.
Sure, absolutely.
So and hopefully you're taking stock, and if you're seeing that they're not interested, you better change something up real quick if you really want to get a message through to them,
Yeah. And as you mentioned earlier, KCPT bought the bridge.
What they did, yeah.
And when KCPT bought the bridge and they moved it to Kansas City,
yes.
What types of changes did you see the station go through?
Well, and that's the funny thing. So I was I graduated with my master's. I looked for a job. I was fortunate enough to get the job at State Fair Community College in Sedalia, Missouri. And while I was there, this ownership started to take place, or the changing in ownership took place. And so I was still in contact with John Hart, who's the station manager at the bridge. And I was still in contact with Byron, who's the operations director. And, I kept in contact with the music scene as well, because I'm also very passionate about music and passionate about the music scene in general. And so I found out through John that they were, that KCPT was buying them out, that they were taking ownership, because they were really, KCPT has very innovative leadership, and they were very bent on making sure that they were covering a lot of different aspects in regard to the public community as a whole in Kansas City. And so they had looked at other cities across the country and said, seen, okay, what is Kansas City missing? Well, all these really great cities with really vibrant culture scenes, arts and culture scenes, have AAA radio stations, non-commercial AAA radio stations. And so we would like to be able to do that for Kansas City. And so they looked around, they saw the bridge, and they approached the University of Central Missouri and said, hey, we think that this would be really great for us and for Kansas City. And University of Central Missouri agreed, and there they went. And so John contacted me, and he knew, because I was the assistant music director as a student there. I moved up, kind of through the ranks. I worked there for a long time. And I loved music. I'd sit in on his music meetings all the time. I'd always kind of push my way into the office. Whether he wanted me in there or not, I was like, what are you listening to, buddy? And then and eventually it just got to the point where he was like, what do you think about this? And then I eventually I just worked into the title of assistant music director. And so he said, Channel 19 is buying us. We need a music director. Are you interested? And while I was like, man, I do love teaching. I love teaching. There's this opportunity to help build this beautiful community-oriented, thing that is AAA radio in Kansas City that's all listener supported. So it was a very beautiful opportunity, and he needed help, and he knows that I knew the mission. I was very ingrained in the culture, and so it just made sense for me to do that at that point in time.
How much liberty have you guys had to take on as far as the programming once it got moved to KCPT?
All of it.
All of it.
Yeah, I mean, John, I'm not really privy to like what happened behind closed doors in regard to like the first talks whenever it, came through. I mean, though I probably would be if I asked, but I just let John handle that aspect of it. But it was really, as far as programming, what we put on the air. Like again, I'm music director in Tidal, and but John's the station manager. We both work in collaboration to pick the music, and so record reps call us up every week. They talk to us. They talk to both of us, and we really do make those decisions together. And a lot of stations, especially a lot of commercial stations, people will be given the title music director, but different people actually make, like, usually it's like station manager or something that eventually says, no, this is what gets put on air. That happens more than you'd think. Right. And that's not the case at the Bridge. I mean, it's a very collaborative process.
So explain to the listeners what exactly a music director does.
So it's funny because it depends on the station again, but it's director of music. So essentially you find and identify music that you think fits in with your culture and what your station represents, and then you put it on the air. And that's the very, very, very simplified version. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's a lot that goes into it in regard to figuring out like rotations and how much you want it to play, how much exposure you want to give it, and that you want the listeners to hear what the perfect level is of spins versus audience listening fatigue. Like, you don't want people to become, especially at a non-commercial station, you don't want people to get sick of a track that you're spinning because you play it 100 times a week. Right. But that's the core part of what a music director does now. My job also entails a bunch of other things because we're a very small staff. Mm-hmm. I mean, we've got 4 people that are dedicated to the radio side of it in the building. And so, and we all do different things. And so, I do marketing and I do on-air stuff, and we do like the local show with Chris, and mm-hmm. We have this program Bridge TV, and, the marketing takes up a lot of it, I think, too. But it's a full-time job. Yeah, definitely a full-time job.
So has there ever been an artist that you were really personally really into, and you brought it to the station, and you had some struggles, maybe saying, well, maybe our listener base wouldn't be into this, but I'm really passionate about it. Let's give it a chance. Or how does that process work?
That's an interesting question. I think yes, in a way, not I'm picking it because it maybe has something like we may add something sometimes that even I don't like, mm-hmm. So I think this answers your question in a way, because anything we pick, there are different reasons for us picking it, Okay. Is there an interesting level of instrumentation? Obviously quality, right? Like, mm-hmm. Are the musicians very, talented and good musicians? Right. Are the lyrics somewhat compelling, and are they amazingly compelling, over the top? And is there something about this song that says Kansas City that maybe another song doesn't? There are all kinds of reasons that you look at. Mm-hmm. And sometimes those answers are yes, but it's something that's just, I wouldn't pop in my car if, it's not something I listen to on my way home, just like on my personal thing. But I know that there'd be a huge portion I think that there'd be a huge portion of the listenership that we've identified with that actually might like it, or at least need to be exposed to it. And so that'll get put on the air. And then there are other times where it's like, there are tons of times, most of the time, when things we listen to, it's like, this is fantastic, just because I think I am a Bridge listener too. Mm-hmm. And so I hope heavily and wholeheartedly that, it resonates with me because I am a Bridge listener, and that means it'll resonate with our listeners too. Right.
Has there been any song where you guys were kind of iffy about it and you put it on rotation and it just got a great response?
Normally that happens with songs that are polarizing, and so people either love it or hate it. Right. Courtney Barnett's a really good example of an artist that, for whatever reason, not whatever reason, she has a very if you're not familiar with Courtney Barnett, she has a very kind of like straightforward, almost talking, singing type of a voice. Mm-hmm. And if that's not your thing, then that's not your thing. And if it is your thing, then you absolutely love it. And so I've had people come up to us and say, "Oh my, I love Courtney Barnett," and other people be like, "Why do you play that so much?" And it's just one of those things where, you know, you can't please everybody all of the time.
Right.
But, you know, she's this artist from Australia that maybe you wouldn't have been familiar with if you hadn't heard it on the bridge. You know, Steve Martin came out with a record a couple of years ago with Edie Brickell and the Steep Canyon Rangers. It's very country. I mean, Steve Martin, I don't know, the actor, Steve Martin, the actor, is also an incredibly amazing banjo player. And so it's one of those things. It was a murder ballad, right? And it is very twangy and it is very in your face. And a lot of people don't go to the bridge thinking like twang in your face, you know, like it's not something that they, you know, that they possibly, but we got such an amazing response on it because it's kind of one of those, you got to put stuff in there that makes people stop, that makes people, you know, it's music that makes you think, right? And that's one of the things about AAA, Adult Album Alternative. It's hopefully, I mean, that's what we aim for. It's music that makes you think. It's music it's not just background music. You know?
Right. And that's kind of the beauty of what you guys do in your whole model is that you have the flexibility to be able to play and put stuff like that out.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
It's extremely important, especially now. So. What would you say is the most stressful part of your job?
Oh, man. Alex, you're grilling me,
I'm
man.
sorry.
Ouch.
The listeners want to know, Sarah. We want to know because you're so positive all the time. It's like you probably never have to deal with stress, or you do.
Oh, yeah, right.
You do, but you deal with it so well
Funny
that
guy.
we can't even tell.
You should talk to my husband and my boss and see if they tell you this. No, I mean, you know, it's... you got to be positive, man. You have got to. I've always felt that way. Like from the time I was a little kid, it's like I like being happy.
Sure.
Who doesn't like being
Right.
happy? So I'm going to choose to be happy. Yeah, that doesn't mean I'm going to like not pay attention to things that are not, you know, good and not respond to those things, but, you know, or like just go about blissfully ignorant to things because I want to stay happy. But I think, you know, maintaining a certain amount of positivity and like making a conscious effort to maintain a certain level of positivity about things, pay attention to negative thinking, make sure that I'm not engaging in it too much, at least. I mean, I'm human, so we all do. But I think the most stressful part, you know, we can't play everything. You know, so that's a little bit stressful, especially when the lists get tight. And also, like, the amount, you want to do so much. I think it's just like anybody else's job, you know, like a lot of people get stressed if the level of things that are happening is more than they, like, more than they bargained for. All of a sudden, it's like, oh, my goodness. But that is also a really good problem to have, you know? So it's like we're really, really, really busy. And so that can be stressful at times, but that's a very good problem to have, so I can't really complain about it, you know? Like,
it is a good problem to have
like,
in spurts, though. All right, and with that, let's go ahead and take a very short break. But when we get back, we'll talk more with my guest in the studio with me today, Miss Sarah Bradshaw. You're tuned into Indie MOOment here on eCAV Radio. Welcome back to Indie MOOment here on eCAV Radio. I'm your host, A. Beats, and thank you so much for tuning in. You picked a really good show to check out today because my special guest in the studio with me is Miss Sarah Bradshaw, who is the music director at the Bridge 909. During this portion of the interview, we talk about a lot of fun things, such as the future of radio, how programming works at the Bridge, and what a typical work week looks like for Sarah. In addition to that, before we get back into the interview, let's go ahead and check out another song that Sarah sent me, which ushered in her love for independent music. This one comes from Andrew Bird, and the song is called Imitosis. After this song is done, we'll go ahead and start chatting it back up with Sarah, which will take us up to our next commercial break. You're tuned into Indie MOOment here on eCAV Radio.
He's keeping busy as bleeding stones, with his machinations and his palindromes. It was anything but hear the voice, anything but hear the voice. It was anything but hear the voice that says that we're all basically alone. Poor Professor Pynchon had only good intentions when he put his bunts and burned his all away, and turned into a playground and petri dish where single cells would swing their fists at anything that looks like easy prey. And this nature show that rages every day was then the part is intuition say. what all his studies had shown, that what's mistaken for closeness was just a case for mitosis. One, the some show no mercy, while others are painfully shy. Tell me, doctor, can you quantify? 'Cause he just wants to know the reason why. Like a billion spores, and let the wind just carry them away. How can calyx be so mean? Our famous doctor tried to glean as he went home at the end of the day. And this nature showed it rages every day. It was down he hauled his intuition say we were all basically alone, despite what all his studies had shown. Mistaken for closeness was just a case of mitosis. She'll fatal doses, malcontent to osmosis. Whoa, do some show no mercy while others are painfully shy. Well, tell me, doctor, can you quantify the reason why?
What are your thoughts on the future of radio? You know, some people will say it needs to become more niche and focalized more locally to move forward, or perhaps take the approach that you guys had, where it's community funded,
right,
as opposed to commercially funded.
Well, and I think that's important because maybe, and I don't know if all your listeners are aware of the difference between commercial and non-commercial radio. You know, commercial radio gets funded through, commercial support. So as you'd think, you're going to hear Sunday, and you're going to hear different types of like advertisements on your station. Non-commercial, we have underwriters, so you may hear something like so-and-so is coming to town, or there's this law firm here in town, just in case you didn't know. But they're very, very short, sweet, to the point. There's not a lot of production, and then it goes right back into the music. And another huge part of our revenue comes from the listening audience. And so, it's just like funded by listeners like you. And so people call in and help support us in that way. And sorry, I went way off. What was the question?
You went into the marketing mode.
I did.
It's all good.
Sorry.
It's all good. The future of radio.
Oh, future of radio. That was it. Thank you, Alex. I apologize.
Broadcast radio. Broadcast radio.
I was like, what
that
am I
lavender
about?
Coffee
that
you
happens. I am drinking. I have just tried a lavender vanilla coffee before I came here. Lady was really, really nice. But I'm sorry. Yes. So it's a tough question because I can't tell the future. I hate it. And I don't use that word very freely, but I hate it when people say, oh, radio's going to die. Because, they've been saying about radio and since the advent of the television. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? And I think that mediums like Pandora and Spotify and, those different types of elements are challenging radio in certain aspects because it's narrowcasted. People kind of get to choose their own medium. Mm-hmm. But I do agree with the standpoint of localizing. I think that regardless of what we do as a culture, hopefully we are always, as human beings, humans are social creatures. And so we're always going to be on the search for a way to connect with other people in our community. And I think that radio is a really powerful, really easy way to do that because you get in your car, most cars have radios, if not all, right? Like,
That's
unless your radio is
right.
broken. So it's really easy way for you to connect with your community on your way to wherever it is you're going or whatever it is you're doing. And so I think that, you know, the local aspect of it, man, it's so incredibly important. And so, I mean, I do think that that is the savior, if you will, though I think it's just kind of the job of radio, really.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it'll be fine.
Yeah.
It'll change probably. I mean, again, I can't tell the future. I think that, you know, maybe the way that we access it will change. You know, who knows if it'll stay terrestrial? Who knows if it'll, you know, if it'll go to, you know, all satellite and, you know, communications, you know, digital media, you know, avenues in regard to like apps and,
right.
you know, streaming through your car, Bluetooth, you know, who knows? That's probably the way it'll go. I don't know, though.
It's interesting you mentioned cars. Yeah, that's the kind of way I look at it too. And until car manufacturers stop putting radios in cars,
right?
You know, that's going to kind of be
right.
possibly a signal. Who knows? What are your thoughts on how important radio is now with breaking a young artist?
You know, I think it's still. I really do. And again, I'm wrapped up in my own little world, and so it's really hard. It's not like I haven't gone out and looked at studies that say this many artists. I don't even know if those studies exist as far as like, well, this is how this is how this band got discovered, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I think it's still a very important role, and one of the reasons I think that is that every week we are inundated with calls from record reps, with CDs, with links in our email, you know, just inundated with new music of people trying to get ears on the new music that their artist is putting out. And so I think that it's still really huge. You know, again, I can't speak as to where that's going to go in the future, but I think as long as you have a radio station, as long as you have a medium that can get that artistry out to a listening audience, there's no reason for it to go away. And so I think it still plays a really huge role.
Tell me about how the programming works. Let's say as far as laying out the music schedule. Do you guys say, okay, we're going to have some singer-songwriter, and then we're going to go into this genre, and then we're going to go and have this genre? How does that?
Not really.
Okay.
No. Yeah, we really don't. I mean, we guard for things. We don't want, again, that Cactus Blossoms track. I don't want that Cactus Blossoms track playing right next to the Steve Martin Pretty Little One murder ballad, like hardcore twang either, because you've got two similar songs that turn your head. You know, those songs are in there for flavor.
Sure.
You know, they're in there to get people to be like, what is this? You know, and make people kind of sit up and be like, wow, this is interesting. And if you put songs like that back to back to back to back, then it kind of defeats the purpose. And so we have some minor protections on to make sure that kind of stuff doesn't happen. But like, we don't protect against things like, you know, male or female vocal or, you know, elements like that. That, you know, we don't say, oh, well, in this category, we definitely want, I think I've explained it already. That was about to be more redundant. It was just going to. So yeah, no, we don't. We put minor protections on there, but that's about it.
So nothing like getting down to the BPM. Well, this one's 150.
Oh, no.
This one's 70.
No.
That's not going to make sense.
No, we don't guard for tempo. I mean, we figure if we're adding something, we believe in it, and it doesn't matter what it plays next to. It's hopefully you're going to like it, or it's going to at least make you turn your head or make you think or make you appreciate it, you know.
How much liberty do you guys have to pick, let's say, because when labels are calling you, I'm assuming that they're pushing the latest single.
Right.
And I would hopefully assume that they also share with you the entire album.
A lot of times.
How much flexibility do you guys have to say, well, the single's great, but I'm really behind this song and the whole team's behind this song?
It depends on the project. We can do whatever we want.
Yeah.
I mean, it's our station. We can do whatever we want. But another thing that we consider is the artist. And if a record rep, like if they have hired a record rep, or if there is a record rep that believes in them, that says, all right, well, this is the single, and this is the song that we're going for nationwide, and that we feel like if we work on this single, that it's going to help us get like a certain amount of hits on the chart. It's going to make us better able to gauge how people are liking it. That single will probably sell, which will therefore let us, you know, engage further with this artist and help their career more, get them out on tour, yada, yada, yada. And so if they have a plan behind an artist, we usually go with the plan out of respect because it helps the artist. It doesn't hurt the artist.
Right.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
And so it builds familiarity across multiple different mediums, as opposed to, you know, if every city's playing a different track from their audience. I mean, think about it. Like if you're walking into a a grocery store or a clothing store or whatever else, and you hear a song and then you hear it on like a commercial on TV, or you hear it somewhere else and it's the same song, then that makes you kind of perk up and be like, oh, I just heard this song. And it starts to build familiarity. You start to be like, oh, I really like this song. Who is this? And you help support each other in that way to help build the artist's story.
Right.
And so and that's why people go with singles, is because they have a story to tell, and it helps if everybody's on the same page. And they're not reading the story at like different times. It's not disjointed.
Kind of walk me through a typical week. What does Sarah Bradshaw do aside from drinking lavender coffee?
It depends on this is actually my first time drinking lavender coffee. I will have you know, but it's actually quite delicious. It
smells like flowers in here.
Yeah, it does. I hope it has some sort of like health benefit, and I'm not just like drinking the flower, like the feel of flowers for nothing. What was I going to say? This is really bad today. This lavender is not helping focus my concentration.
Noted.
A typical week in my, it depends on the week, Alex. It's just like anything else. If we get a ton of concert spots that we've been bought on, then there's a bunch of marketing that needs to be done. And so some weeks will be more marketing laden than anything else, and then other weeks will allow for, open things up for more like music discovery, et cetera, though the music discovery is always happening, so don't let me, I say that and I'm like, well, we're still listening to music all the time, but sometimes I get to do like the deep dive, and I love those weeks. Those are the weeks that I look forward to.
Now, I'm assuming your job isn't really a 9 to 5. I'm assuming that you have like nights, things that you do.
It depends. Yeah, it depends on the week, man. I mean, there are a lot of times where I can, luckily, there are a lot of things in regard to the marketing aspect of it that I can do from home. And so it's like sometimes I can, like today I left work early and so, but there's still things that need to get done. And
thank you for that.
Yeah, well, no, you're welcome. So it's like, so I'll go home and I can work on like the website and uploading things and writing pieces and yada, yada, yada. I can do all that from home. And so there are a lot of times, yes, though, when I'm at home doing stuff. Yeah, it is. But I think you can't get a job in the music industry and have it be a 9 to 5. There's no, if you have that, let me know. Again, let me know how you're doing that, because that's rare.
So a lot of people say that because I would assume that you're extremely passionate about this.
Yeah,
that's why you're very awesome about what you do. So a lot of people say once you take your passion and you essentially monetize it, so you turn it into a full-time job, that passion tends to fade away. Have you experienced that at all, or has your passion increased because now you get paid to do what you love?
If we're being honest, it depends on the day.
Yeah.
No, I always love music, and my passion for music is never going to change. My passion for music is never, ever going to change. Like, I love music. I love discovering new music. And so in that way, no. I don't know, man. Like, I think it's kind of the opposite. I think that if you find something that you absolutely love, that you're passionate about, then you don't work a day in your life, Though, again, we're all human beings, and so there are days when you're going to be like, bleh. But overall, it's like you need to be able to look in the mirror every day and say, all right, like, am I happy? I think that's overall the thing. And if, more often than not, you're not happy, well, then you need to do something else.
Right. Time for a career change, possibly at that point.
Yeah.
Who are some of the biggest mentors or some of the people who've had the most impact on your career thus far?
John Hart, definitely. Yeah, John Hart's our station manager. And he's the one who would let me into his office to do the music meetings, like he'd let me bother him. And he's really, really, he's a highly intelligent individual, and he's been in radio his whole life. Literally, he started like in the radio club when he was in high school, and just like went from there. He's, it was at KY when it was like back in the heyday of rock radio in Kansas City. And, he's been all over. He's seen everything in regard to all aspects of radio. And so, he's very, very intelligent in regard to the way that he does things, but also very passionate about what he does. And so, he's definitely the one that made me want to stay in radio and then come back to radio. Yeah.
And he's probably the most polite human being, aside from yourself, I've ever met.
Yeah, no, he's a really cool
nice
guy.
And with that, let's go ahead and take our final break for the show. It's going to be very short, as it always is, so be sure to stay tuned in, because when we get back, we're going to wrap up our episode today with a very interesting story that Sarah shares with us about an interview that she did with Eugene Hoots from Gogo Bardello. You're tuned into Indie MOOment here on eCAV Radio. Welcome back to Indie MOOment on eCAV Radio. I'd like to give a special thanks to my guest, Miss Sarah Bradshaw, for coming in and hanging out with me. I'm your host, Dave Beats, signing off. So tell me, what's the biggest gaffe you've made on air?
Ooh, I don't know. We try to not think about those. Like, you gotta be able to like wake up every morning, Alex. Like, come on, man. Like, I don't know. I mean, I know I've made them. Don't get me wrong. Luckily, my biggest fear actually is to, cuss on air, and so I haven't done that.
Because you are definitely a potty mouth once that mic turns off. No, you're not.
Maybe we just haven't had enough conversation, sir. Like, it's really not. I'm not. Gosh, on the spot, I can't think of it. I know I'm going to leave here and I'm going to be in the car and I'm going to be like, oh yeah, like that
one time.
and then that time, and then that time, and then that time. I will say, I do remember one of my most. It wasn't actually on air though. It was recorded, but I ended up, of course, like leaving it in the interview because it was part of the interview, and it was like it was something I couldn't cut out. Though believe me, I would have. Be like, I was interviewing Gogo Bordello, Eugene Hoots from Gogo Bordello backstage when I was in college, and John again allowed me the freedom, like he said, go up there, go backstage and interview Eugene Hoots from Gogo Bordello, and I was like, oh my god, I love Gogo Bordello. I'm gonna be an idiot. And we went back there, and he is, I don't know if you're not very familiar with him, he's he's so intense. He's a really, really, really intense guy. Very deliberate, but crazy, like passionate, crazy intense. He's been a professional model and like a track star, and he's been in movies, and, he's got this world famous band, the dude he's very, very driven. And he saw, like, at first he was being kind of flipped because unfortunately, here's something else that I don't know if many of your listeners know, but unfortunately, I often have to apologize for the radio industry as a whole when we have traveling artists come through, because they're expecting interviewers who haven't done their research, because so often they've gone into radio stations where like people have been like, what's your favorite kind of pizza? They don't even know they have a new album out. Like they don't know the name of the new album. Like they haven't done any. That happens so often. It happens. It is a plague on the industry. And because it's like, this is like an artist's career, and you're not paying tribute to them, like you're not taking time. So, basically people don't do their research. And so what happens is the artist, and I've lost myself again. This is the most ADD. I apologize. And that's not, I shouldn't be flip about ADD, but this is the most like out of attention I've been.
No, you're just talking about how a lot of people who do interviews, a lot of the interviewers don't do their research.
Right, they don't.
Yeah, and that is embarrassing. Yeah. To me, that would be embarrassing. It's like, why are you wasting this person's time if you don't go and you actually do the proper research on them? It's a respect thing.
Right.
But what we were talking about before that was any of the biggest gaffes that you made.
Oh, that's it. Thank you. That's what I was trying to get back to. And so Gogo Bordello, Eugene Hoots, he'd been to a numerous amount of radio stations, I'm assuming, where people hadn't done their research. And he has enough of a personality and he has enough confidence to be able to really screw with those people if they're wasting his time. Sure. Do you know what I'm saying? Yeah. And so he was fully prepared to screw with me. Like you could see it. He sat down with his bag of chips and they were kettle cooked, so they were like nice super crunchy. Yeah, and he sat down with his bag of chips, and I started off, and I'm like, and I flubbed the pronunciation of Hoots at first, and I had done the research. It's not that I hadn't done the research, but I love him. I'm stupid, and I'm giddy, and I flubbed it, and he's like, it's Hoots, And then he takes the chip and he starts crunching it into the microphone, and I'm like, oh man, come on.
Here we go.
Come on. And so my first question, I have my notes, and I read from, not word for word, but I look down, I get the question together, and I ask him the question, and then he sees, okay, she's done her research. And so then instead of being like silly and flip, he started to get serious. But when he gets serious, man. So all of a sudden, he had decided that, okay, he was going to give me the interview. And when he started, he turned it on. And it's like, when you have one of those moments with an individual where you're having a conversation, and it's like there's some sort of, I'm going to get metaphysical here, but there's some sort of intensity that's like if you could see it, it's like a flowing line of light that's like coming out of their body.
Sure.
And it's like encapsulating the room and it's surrounding you and it's causing you to like only focus on them. You know, I mean, have you ever felt that way?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So and that's what happened. I mean, he's just this force. We have like a desk in between us and it's like the force is like coming out, man. And he has honed it in right on me and I'm sitting across from him and I've still got to do this interview, but there's this force, right? And it's like, oh, this is intense. And I'm trying to ask him questions. At one point I asked him, I can't even remember what the question was, but he got so intense about it. And it was beautiful. Whatever he was saying was just, it was this gorgeous, gorgeous response. And so, and I'm feeling a well of emotion because I have to be involved in it, but try to be detached. Well, that wasn't working. And it's like, and so like he's beautiful answer, and he's being really passionate about it. And I started tearing up.
Yeah,
you know, because I'm like, that's beautiful, man. Like, you know, like tears like starting to like spill over, and I'm like, oh my God, like this guy probably thinks I'm such a flake, right? Like, and he wasn't really even paying attention at that point. Like, I mean, he was, but he wasn't like he was in it, you know?
Yeah.
And so he starts to kind of come out of the reverie and he sees that I'm like welling up, and then he starts to kind of look at me like, what? And I'm like, you really don't know? You don't know what kind of like effect you're having right now? Come on, right? And so I finished the interview and I get done, but I was mortified, you know? I finished it, and I think you only hear I went back to listen to it, obviously, and I would like, and you could hear my voice like this much, but if you didn't know I was crying, you couldn't tell, but it didn't matter because my tears welled up in front of Eugene Hoots, and I'm like, this is it, whatever, man. Like, you know what? Like, I'm done. I'm done with this interviewing thing. I never want to do it again. I left, and I was mortified, and I don't know why, you know, looking back on it again, like I was younger, it was one of my, not one of my, but I mean, it was among the first like 10 that I had ever done.
Yeah.
I wasn't very experienced. And I'm not ashamed of it now, you know, which is why I'm telling the story, because it's like now I'm looking back and I'm like, whatever, you know, I was welling up with emotion. He was amazing, you know. But back then it was like, it was one of the worst things because I'm like, Eugene thinks I'm a flake and I'm an idiot, you know. So, but I'm not, no, I wouldn't be ashamed of it today.